Welcome back to another reading of SCP Resurrection New Faces Up, dear researcher. Today we'll be reading Bottom Floor by Grigory Karpin. Now, without further ado, Bottom Floor. Site Theta Operations Control. Sophia Light looked over the security officer's shoulder at the monitor.
You can't reach them at all?
No, Director. Radio contact started off spotty and then cut off completely.
What about life signs?
It looks like either 5601 sensors are malfunctioning or it's been neutralized.
Shit. What about the others?
All written normally as before, although 4494 never registered in the first place.
Light started tapping her foot impatiently. She looked across the operations room to Agent Carlotta Denab, who was adjusting the communications equipment, bent forward, peering at the screen.
Carlotta, I think it's a lost cause. God knows what sort of hell this anomaly is playing with reception.
Carlotta looked up at her with a grimace.
It's not a lost cause when we have agents in the field still showing signs of life, Director Light. I didn't mean they were a lost cause, just that...
The operations room door opened behind Carlotta, and the figure standing in the doorway distracted Sophia from finishing her sentence. There stood a man wearing jeans and a wrinkled long-sleeve button-down shirt under a cardigan. He had wild, light brown hair and an unkempt 5 o'clock shadow. He leaned against the door jamb in a casual manner and scanned the room. When his eyes centered on Sophia, he entered the room and started speaking. Reality is merely an artificial construct of our own devising. So, any perceived fluctuations aren't any less real than buttered toast, or a man standing in the corner looking away from you. He paused to laugh. Not that there's anyone in that corner at the moment. Sophia turned and looked behind her at the empty corner of the operations room and sighed. She turned back to the man and said,
We're having an emergency. Tell me who you are or get locked in a cell.
A cell won't do for Dr. Irving Gatt, who is very much at your service. We corresponded several weeks ago about my joining the quest. Kept you waiting, huh?
Yes, you have. I expected you here days ago.
Well, there were several things that required my attention at site place of interest, so I was unavoidably detained. But I read the documents you sent to me on the flight over, and
He looked down at the communication station Carlotta was sitting at, reached over her shoulder, twisted a knob, and adjusted power to the transceiver a slight amount.
There, all fixed. Try now, he said with a grin.
Carlotta looked up at Light with wide eyes.
Says we're sending now. I only got error messages before.
Light looked back at Irving Gatt.
What did you do?
The power was a smidge too low for reaching deep underground during an esoteric crisis such as this. Lots of reality smashing into itself and all that hullabaloo. Signals can get lost in very strange ways. No way the dashing agent Deneb would have known.
What is your experience again, Dr. Gatt?
You know how we have all these anomalies that defy rational thought?
She nodded.
Yes. What of it?
I just hate that.
Sophia stared at him, and his only response was another grin.
All right, do you have any insight into the situation?
Having just arrived here, you would assume I could not possibly be informed on the current status of the operation. And you know what they say about assumptions.
Assumptions.
Sorry?
Light sighed again.
The saying is, you know what they say about when you assume, so the word you were looking for was assumptions.
I've never looked for a word once in my life.
He retrieved a small vial from inside his cardigan, undid the stopper, and drank the contents. He coughed.
Oh, sorry. Daily agnostics. Must do.
What did you just drink?
I already said. Okay, let's get those reality what's its back in sync, shall we?
He sat down at an empty console, pulled out pen and paper, and began writing lists. He looked up at Light with wide eyes.
Oh, I should have asked. What's your policy on bullet points?
Sub-basements of Site Theta. Luciredia looked around the chamber she was in and saw the walls bulging in, undulating ripples. They went from solid to gas to solid again in several moments' time and then settled into their normal shape. Why the hell did I agree to this? She thought. She keyed her communicator and spoke.
Command, are you reading?
Only static responded.
In case you hear me, squad has been separated. The walls warped when on stairs and several of group lost. I am with Agent Miller and Robot. We continue to deepest section of the facility. Pompescu out.
She looked over at Raynor and SCP-1360.
Either of you reach Light?
Raynor shook his head.
No, the equipment seems to be malfunctioning.
I doubt very much that the equipment is to blame, 1360 typed into its text-to-speech converter. The shifts are becoming more violent. It is very likely they are affecting digital and analog transmissions as well as the shape of the environment.
It's been broken fucking signal since we came down here. Could not Light see this problem?
Luciredia said.
She couldn't possibly have known it would be an issue. I trust Director Light. She's got as much invested in our success as we do. More even.
Raynor said. Luciredia sighed.
Your turn, Robot. What you doing on those stairs?
What do you mean? It typed.
I mean, you hold back and what half of squad pulled in different directions. Other half went Orok, knows where. What you do?
I was merely descending at a slower speed than you.
Bullshit. You said you can detect the shift moments before they obvious to the rest of us. You're watching to see if we make it. And you didn't think to warn us.
Luciredia's right hand squeezed into a fist at her side, her arm shaking slightly. I'm sure that's not true, right, 1360? Raynor raised a hand between Luciredia and the android, looking from one to the other. It is not true. I did not intentionally fail to warn you.
But you noticed the shift before we were separated, and whatever happened to the bird and the specter?
Luciredia asked. I did notice.
Then why you say nothing? Specific instructions from Light. Pay attention to surroundings and use fancy senses to protect group.
Luciredia approached the android until she was only inches from its face. If 1360 had a reaction, it wasn't noticeable to Luciredia. Raynor withdrew his hand rapidly and stepped back from the two.
Will.
I have already answered your question. I did not intentionally fail to warn you.
So what? Was accident?
I do not know, it typed.
You believing this?
She said to Raynor over the android's shoulder. I don't know. After the double agent, who's to say who's loyal or not? Raynor shrugged, but his posture belied tension.
All right. Light said there could be another, right?
Luciredia turned back to 1360 and grabbed 2 handfuls of its tunic.
Is that it, Robot? You're working as double agent?
It grabbed onto both her wrists and pulled, gently but forcibly, until our hands were free of the material. It was strong. She stared at the android, a bit shocked.
It typed on the tablet. I did not betray you. I am not working for someone else. Or anyone, really. Light asked me to join, and I agreed. What possible motive would I have?
I don't know. I ask again. Why didn't you warn us if you know?
She yelled this last part directly into its face. This is boring me. We have a mission, Pompascu, and if you'd rather argue here, then I'll continue on my own. 1360 sidestepped around her and bolted into a sprint. Luceredia couldn't have matched its speed if she tried. She turned from the corridor it had disappeared into and looked at Raynor.
What is it doing?
Well, if you accused me of betraying the team, I wouldn't like it much either, he said.
Bleh. Even robot men babies. Try communicator again, she said.
It won't work. No signal is getting out.
You pull things out of air, right? So, can't you get something that would, I don't know, boost signal?
Maybe, he said. He closed his eyes for a moment, and a small hole in reality popped open, and ejected a small object the size of a paperback book, which he caught in midair. He smiled as he handed it to her. Plug this into your communicator. No guarantees, though. She took the gray plastic box from him and connected the USB cord to the input on her vest. Immediately, they both heard Carlotta's voice in their earpieces. Alpha 9, come in. Repeat, please make contact. Site Theta, Operations Control. Gat was furiously scribbling on the notepad when he looked up and pointed his pen at Light, which she saw out of the corner of her eye.
Have you considered the possibility that these shifts are not the result of a specific anomaly, but something more esoteric?
Like what exactly?
Scranton reality anchors are in essence an attempt to force reality in a more ordered function. But that function is one we perceive to be the right one. So, it is possible that these shifts are other right ones, but from a completely different point of view.
Huh. Light touched her forefinger and thumb to her chin. That's actually pretty intriguing. So, less warping of our reality and more other realities forcing their rules into ours from some outside source? Interesting. Where did you come up with that?
Oh, I was thinking of Gestalt and the possible impact of our sociological understanding of the world on the actual mechanics of the universe. Call it meta-quantum theory or something. Also chicken.
Chicken?
I'm famished. Can't we get some food up here? Surrealistic thinking is hungry work.
Light sighed in frustration. I'll see about it. But you were saying? He continued scribbling on his pad, but then stopped, put the pen in his mouth, and looked up at the monitors showing the life signs of the team.
I think the more esoteric members of the squad are probably most at risk. You shouldn't have sent the Bird or the Avenger down there.
Wait, why?
They already represent another system imposing itself on our baseline understanding of reality, so they're most likely more sensitive to any shifts. I'd say their chances are diminutive.
Fuck. But if the shifts are some outside force pushing other realities into ours, maybe we could disrupt the signal? But he wasn't listening, just scribbling on his notepad again. She turned to the nearest security officer. Bring up a list of all the anomalies kept on site, along with the SRA accompaniment as currently outfitted into our systems. Yes, Director? She was looking at the screens, waiting for the requested display when Carlotta gasped. I've got them! Put them through the main system. I want to talk to whoever is still operational. Luceretia's icon flashed on screen.
Command we read. What is with comms?
Never mind that, Agent. How did you manage to make contact through the interference?
Rainer produced signal booster. Seems to be working now.
Sit rep, please.
The bird and the spectre are missing. 1360's run off. Just me and Rainer now. The fucking building attacked us and we all got separated. I think I was somewhere else for a while.
Where?
I don't know, but don't want to go back there.
What's happening with 1360?
It failed to warn us of a shift that it knew would happen, which is when everything went crazy fuck. It is possible that I accused Robot of working against us.
And I take it that's why 1360 ran off?
Think so.
Okay then, orders remain the same. You're to proceed into the deepest parts of the facility, as we have reason to believe that's the source of the shifts. But also keep an eye out for your fellow teammates. We have reason to believe they've been injured or neutralized.
In 1360?
It's odd how it didn't inform you. Can robots even get offended like that? Try talking with it.
And if turns hostile?
You are free to engage with any entities taking offensive action against you, 1360 included.
Understood.
We've got a new theory up here concerning the shifts, and we're going to try something in a bit. See if we can't make things easier for you.
Any help would be appreciated. Pompescu out.
Light turned back to the room and looked at the people gathered there. Which one of you is certified as an SRA technician? The security officers looked around at each other until one raised their hand. A young man in a shirt and tie.
I am. What do you need, Director?
We're operating under the assumption that these shifts are warps in our reality, which SRAs are meant to be a bulwark against. But if Dr. Gat is correct, then SRAs actually impose our baseline reality onto areas affected by other realities pushing in. Can we bump up the power to the facility's SRA configuration, push back our reality, and thereby force the shifts to recede? The technical officer looked down at his console and began typing, bringing up a new display.
We could reroute power from the external security countermeasures to the SRA configuration, but that would leave us vulnerable. And I have no way of knowing if it'll have your desired effect.
I don't care. Do it.
Carlotta stood up and approached Light.
Are you sure this is a good idea? What if we experience a containment breach, or this other mole you're worried about sees this as an opportunity?
Light looked back at the technical officer.
Don't reroute any power from containment countermeasures, just the external security systems, and close off our connection to SCIPnet. We don't want to allow any opportunistic hackers a window to the system.
The technical officer nodded and continued at his console. Light turned back to Carlotta.
I think it's time to face the fact that we recruited the mole into the team, Agent Deneb. You think 1360 intentionally didn't warn the group? Pompescu does, and while I assume she's under stress, she's the only eyes on the ground we have at the moment.
The technical officer raised his hand, getting Light's attention.
Director, we're ready.
Do it.
Rerouting power from external systems and countermeasures now. We should see an increase in SRA capacity by close to 100%.
Light imagined the mobile turrets and surveillance cameras on the surface powering down. She could almost hear the hum of the currents moving from one target to the other. Suddenly, an alarm started blaring and the emergency lights flared on. Light raised her voice over the klaxon.
What the fuck now? She turned to the technical officer. Report! It's the SRAs? What about them? They're gone? They stopped functioning? No, I mean they're gone, Director. I'm looking at an internal feed. The apparatus just isn't there anymore. Fuck. People, General Sitrep.
Avery stormed into the operations room leaning on a cane.
What the hell is going on with my facility, Sophia?
We're about to find out, Director Avery. She looked at the nearest security officer. Report.
Internal systems other than SRAs seem to be functioning normally, but the containment wings...
What about them?
I'm getting reports from containment personnel all over the base. We've lost a number of anomalies.
Lost? We've been breached?
No, Director, the containment countermeasures are still in place, just as they were. It's the anomalies themselves. They're just not there anymore.
How many?
Over 100, ma'am.
Carlotta tensed and turned towards the door.
Agent Deneb, where are you going? I'm going to get my team light. Hold on. For what? They've got a potential hostile and a whole facility is going to shit.
Light turned to the technical officer.
Did your department get the prototype working?
Yes, Director.
Good. Go get it for me. Right now. Don't dawdle.
She looked back at Carlotta.
Just wait a moment. If you're going to be difficult about this, you may as well be equipped.
What's this prototype? Carlotta asked.
A portable SRA, only moderate strength, but it'll hopefully give you some resistance to the effects down there. Aren't SRAs like huge machines? How am I meant to carry one around? It's in a backpack. Weighs maybe 30 pounds. It'll be a burden, but you'll manage.
The technical officer came back in with a combat backpack, rigged with several external controls. He held it out towards Carlotta, who turned around and crouched slightly as he helped her get it situated and latched into place. Light put her hand on Carlotta's shoulder.
Good luck.
Avery got remarkably close to Sophia and hissed,
I told you it was a mistake to send those freaks down there. Now we're missing over 100 contained anomalies, and who knows what's next.
Nothing good, I think,
she said as she turned from him and back at the monitors showing the team's life signs. She moved a few inches away from his leering, angry look.
If they don't find out what's happening down there, we're all in trouble.
Sub-basements of Site Theta. Luceretti and Rayner moved at a steady pace, checking in each chamber they passed and finding many of them empty of any anomalies of personnel. The alarms had started blaring again just after they'd gotten off the radio with Light, and she was almost starting to ignore their claxons. They were making good progress when the air in the corridor rose 10 degrees and Luceretti felt claustrophobic. Luceretti turned to look back the way they had came and saw the length of the corridor stretching, curving downwards as she watched. Fuck. Not again. Rayner yanked her backwards with all his might suddenly. His fingers looped into her security vest's material. What the, she thought, just as a loud crash happened directly in front of her, sending the both of them sprawling. She looked up from the floor and saw 1360 crouching in a miniature crater in the concrete, dust in the air, and fists sunken several centimeters into the floor. It withdrew its fist from the concrete and stood. The android started moving in their direction.
It's time for you to die, Sarkic. Enough games,
the robot said, no text-to-speech tablet visible. Luceretti stood, picked up Rayner in a fireman's carry, and raced in the other direction. When she reached the part of the corridor where the floor was sloping downwards, she crouched and slid on her butt down the decline until they were several hundred meters away from where they'd encountered the android. The floor leveled and curved in another direction, and she sat Rayner down and dusted him off.
Sorry, just reacted. You hurt?
You're the one the machine almost pasted,
he said, louder than was necessary.
Thank you, but Steve, when did a robot get strong?
Honestly, I don't have any idea how strong it is. I may have misheard, but was it speaking?
Rayner asked.
Yes, very weird.
She looked back up the incline of the corridor and saw it standing at the top.
We go!
As they ran down the length of the corridor, a shift in reality folded it back into itself, and Luceretti felt intense vertigo. She bent over and retched, vomiting clear liquid on the floor. She looked up as Rayner patted her shoulder and saw that 1360 was now only 10 meters away, and the corridor was level again. She frantically scanned the hallway for an exit and turned to her right. She pushed open a nearby containment cell door.
Here!
Raynor followed her through and she closed the metal door, sliding the security bar into place. She'd only just secured the bar when there came a horrible pounding at the door.
Pompescu, come out! I thought you were a fighter!
Both she and Raynor leaned against the security door as the android pounded on the opposite side. She looked behind her and saw they were in a small containment room. In the center of the wall was a meter-tall metal pedestal with a glass box atop it. Inside the glass case was a large blue diamond with the label reading SCP 4867 in bold. The reinforced security door continued to resound with the impact of android fists. Now that she had seen the diamond, she couldn't take her eyes off it. The stone seemed to catch the light perfectly no matter what angle she looked at it from. It should have been painful, the way the stone lit up, but it wasn't. Gazing at it was comforting. She turned from the door and walked towards the pedestal. Raynor started yelling something at her, and the pounding grew louder, yet all she could see was the stone. Her hands were on the case, striking the glass over and over, leaving droplets of blood. She remembered to shield her hands in tougher flesh, taken from her how cost. Finally, the glass crumbled, and she pushed away the last bits, placing her fingers on the stone. The door behind her made a shrieking sound, and Raynor screamed as the android punched through the metal. It reached through the hole and forced up the security bar. Raynor was backing away from the door with his hands palms out in front of him. A small wormhole manifested, and flames poured out, splashing against 1360's body. Didn't know he could do that, she thought. 1360 was reaching for her, ignoring the flames catching on the materials of its tunic. Her skin toughened again, taking on the form of a rough keratin covered in bloody spikes. She twisted her arm into a tight loop and brought it close to her body to absorb the force of the android's punch. The pain was spectacular as several of the bony spines broke off under the android's assault. She hit it 3 times quickly in the head with her free hand, the other still cradling the stone. It didn't notice. The android reached for her again, but this time she pivoted and came up from beneath the strike with an uppercut to the jaw. The android stumbled backwards for a few feet, then leapt back at her with its fingers outstretched for her. Luceretia grabbed one of the wrists of the android, twisting it away from her and rearing back to hit it. She wrapped her fingers tightly around the stone and swung with all her might. The stone punched through 1360's chest and emerged through the other side of its torso, her fingers wrapped around it. The android looked down at the hole in its chest and grabbed onto her security vest. It stumbled against her, trying to hold itself up by holding onto her. She could feel the material of its body flaking away under her arm, still piercing the depths of its torso. The android started shaking violently as piece after piece fell away from its form until there was nothing but dust. A few seconds later, there wasn't even that.
Wait, was 1360 even here? What the fuck is going on? Raynor asked.
She looked at the pile of robot ash that wasn't there anymore. She took a ragged breath and shook her head. I don't know. Maybe we worried about the possibility of robot being against us in this affected anomaly?
Because we were afraid? He asked.
Maybe. She looked at the diamond in her hands. Raynor started patting at her vest, and she went to push him off. What the fuck? Get off me! Then she noticed her vest had started to burn, and he was trying to put out the fire. She felt the first pricks of heat through the reinforced material. She started patting down the vest, and he joined in. Be careful with hands and fires.
Sorry, I just wanted him away. Guess it was fireproof.
Raynor said, casting his eyes downwards. Finally, she could look at the diamond again. He turned back to her and caught her staring at the large blue stone.
What is it? Raynor asked.
I don't know, but we will use it. Sub-basements of Site Theta. Somewhere else. Carlotta struggled with the heavy backpack as she approached the location where she had left the team earlier. I should have just gone down with them, she thought. The straps of the backpack bit into her shoulders, causing them to ache. The machinery in the pack had started to hum just a few minutes before entering the sub-basements. She came across a stairwell going down and saw the walls had bulged out of shape in alarming patterns. There were spikes made of concrete and steel from the stairs in one portion, and warped concrete pushing out into the stairs so far that she needed to squeeze her way past in another. The walls and stairs quivered but retained their aggressive shapes. So far, so good. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a moderate-sized concrete landing with a deep hole in its floor, maybe 2 meters wide. She could just make out the bottom, lit by warped, flashing red emergency lights. There were scraps of what looked like coarse iron and blood all around the bottom of the hole. She could smell the sulfur in the air. Poor weird bird. She pushed through the warped and frayed metal of the doors leading to this level of the sub-basement and turned a corner, keeping an eye on the walls for any movement when she tripped over a dark pile of material and something solid she couldn't quite see in the light. She caught herself on the wall of the corridor before she looked at what she had tripped over. 4494 lay in a heap, his chest almost imperceptibly moving with his breathing. It was hard to tell if he was injured, with his form made of shadowy substance like it was. She bent down next to the man-shaped shadow and tried to feel for a pulse. It was warm to the touch, but he felt weirdly smooth, not like the material of clothing or skin at all. She couldn't have described his texture if she were called on to do so. Also, she couldn't find a pulse. This was going so wrong. His hand shot up and gently wrapped oily black fingers around her wrist. Ah, Agent Ineb, how good to see you. I've found myself under a great deal of stress down here.
Are you injured?
She asked the Shadow Man. Physically, only a little. But I find myself under the worst malaise. I may have miscalculated.
What are you talking about?
Perhaps the laws of physics never wanted the Spectre as their companion. She reached down and grasped his shoulders, as best she could with his smooth texture and the inability to see the details of his form.
Champions don't rest on the floor when there's emergencies, right? Let's get you up.
Thank you, officer. She helped him to stand, and he leaned against the wall, then straightened before sliding down it again. He sat with his back against the wall. I don't think I'll be as much use in this fight against crime as I promised. What a horrid day for the champion of justice. Carlotta bent over him and tried to help him up again. He waved her away.
I can't just leave you here.
I think you must. The others need you, I think. Leave me. Let me rest. The Spectre will join you when he can. If he can. She stood, looking down at him for a moment, then looked down the corridor's length in the glaring emergency lights. Go on, I'll be fine, he said.
Okay, but once I find the others, I'm coming back for you.
He nodded as she walked away. Let us hope this opponent of evil can be of use in this dire situation. Site Theta Operations Control. Sophia was ordering one of the security agents around. Avery was looking over her shoulder and glancing around in the different monitors showing the fluctuating humes at play in the lower levels of the facility. Dr. Irving Gatz stopped his scribbling on the pad and looked at the empty corner of the room. Ah, still empty. What a relief. He stood and stretched, looking down at his notes. Materiality is a construct of our own making. We do not literally affect its form merely by thinking on it as individuals, but our universe's laws are held in check by millions of years of sentient observations. The weight of all those minds, those capable of sapience or not, holds the true shape of the firmament. He paced back and forth behind the station he had commandeered. But given enough pressure from an external source, endless other realities can pry their way free of that weight, especially if there were a fulcrum to focus their boundless energies on. As the great Archimedes once said, give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will move the worth of worlds. Wait. He scratched the stubble on his chin. No, I think it was births. Anyway. So, a fulcrum, a universal pry bar to crack open the weight of millennia worth of constant observations by the beings of this universe, such that the incredible becomes mundane and the mundane becomes the impossible. He paused to look at the empty corner of the room. But you say, why so handsome and charming, Dr. Gatt? How would we ever know what the true skein of the universe would look like? And I would answer, that's easy. It looks like this, or it looks like that. Because I'd, of course, have some very poignant diagrams at the ready. Let's pretend I did so, all right? So, if reality is a thing of our own making, but it takes a fulcrum of cosmic intentionality to pry loose the usually rigid laws of our reality, emphasis added, then it should be as simple as taking the fulcrum and smashing it to little itty-bitty bits. Sophia looked in his direction, and he waved, smiling. Of course, it would be ever so prudent to have a group of people that actually had a reason to trust each other do the smashing. Sub-basements of Site Theta. Anytime the walls looked squirrely or the floors began to quake with an impending shift, Luceridia would place the diamond against their surfaces and the fluctuations would stop. No idea what this is, but thank Auric we found it. They had searched through the remaining chambers and corridors until they found themselves in front of an impressively secure set of doors. They looked to operate on motorized channels to slide the heavy reinforced metal to either side. Looks like bronze, Raynor said. She looked at the material of the large doors. It did remind her of the beryllium bronze ritual vessels surrounding the underground Colosseum beneath Moscow. Etched in the bronze of the doors was a message reading, absolutely no entry without level 5 clearance or approval by vote of O5 Council, and entry without proper identification will result in termination. Fucking door is open, she said. Raynor walked up to the doors, peeking his head into the small opening between the two, and then pulling back quickly. He turned to look at Luceridia with wide eyes. Jesus, the robot's in there! Luceridia slid the large blue diamond into her vest and leaned against the right door, sliding it open a few more inches so she could squeeze through. Raynor followed shortly after. 1360 was standing in front of a black cone sunken deep into a pit of magma surrounded by a meter-thick wall of glass. The room was incredibly hot. The shielding glass wall shimmered in a heat haze. The cone was hard to focus her eyes on, but it demanded her attention. The surface of the cone wasn't colored black, it was impossible to see, absorbing all light in the room. What is it? 1360 typed into its text-to-speech tablet. Luceridia stood next to the android and shook her head. Raynor was looking at her, and then at the android. Hey, both of you, snap out of it. Just a second ago, we were fighting off a dream version of 1360 trying to kill us. 1360 turned from the cone and shook its head. I did no such thing, it typed. Luceridia took out the diamond and touched the android's forehead. Nothing happened.
Was another manifestation.
Someone appearing to be myself attacked you?
1360 typed. Luciredia nodded. She turned back to the black clone. The diamond hummed with power and had become cool to the touch.
I think it was this thing, trying to keep us away.
1360 said,
That is my supposition as well. I believe the spike is what is creating the shifts in baseline reality.
Luciredia turned to look back at 1360.
What happened on stairs? Why you abandon us if not guilty?
I don't know. Something is influencing my behavioral programming. I did not choose to not warn the group, but I did fail to warn you.
Raynor said,
Either way, that means the same thing. We can't trust you.
1360 nodded.
That is true, but to be frank, none of us have any reason to trust the other.
The cone vibrated, shedding flaming magma from its pit and slowly ascending until it was levitating 2 meters in the air.
Lucy, what's it doing?
Luciredia gripped the diamond tightly in her cupped hands, shaking her head.
I don't know.
The light in the room was drawn to the levitating cone, leaving the space entirely dark except for glimmering blue light from the diamond in her hands. She felt herself pulled uncontrollably towards the glass wall, and she could not resist the force. She turned to 1360 and Raynor and saw they too were being drawn towards the anomaly. Swirling black mist flowed out from the cone and wrapped itself around her and the others, holding them tight as it pulled them in. She sucked in a deep breath in order to scream, and was dragged into darkness. And that's the end of our reading today, dear researchers. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you all had a wonderful time out there. I really wish they were shorter than 40 minutes every time, but this is what we get. Thank you again for coming. Good luck out there, and hope to see you next time.